Ambassador Crixvel's exoskeleton clicked nervously as he scuttled through the chaos-filled corridors of the Galactic Council's primary station. Diplomatic pouches scattered across the floor, bioluminescent emergency strips flickered erratically, and the usually pristine halls echoed with the panicked communications of 46 different species, all speaking at once. The humans were gone. Not just from their designated sectors, not just from Earth, they had vanished from the entire galactic political framework, taking with them something no one had realized they possessed, until it was too late, the glue that held everything together. Order? O-R-D-E-R. Supreme Counselor Thex 9 hammered his gravitational manipulators against the central podium, but the gesture was futile. The Great Assembly Hall, once a monument to civilized discourse, had devolved into barely controlled bedlam. The Zephyrian delegation had locked themselves in defensive phalanx formation, their crystalline bodies resonating with aggressive frequencies. The aquatic collective was literally boiling with rage, their biotanks overheating as they argued with the Silicon Confederacy. The hive minds were fragmenting, their usually perfect synchronization dissolving into discordant static. Dr. Yailani Ko, the Council's chief xenosociologist, huddled over her emergency analysis station, her four eyes processing data streams that painted an increasingly grim picture. "The cascade failure is accelerating," she announced to anyone within hearing range. "Without human mediation protocols, we're looking at complete diplomatic breakdown within cycles." It seemed impossible. Humans had been the junior members of the galactic community for barely 2 centuries. They were recent additions, curious, adaptable, but ultimately insignificant in the grand scheme of galactic politics. How could their absence cause such immediate and total chaos? The answer lay in humanity's unique position as the universal translators. Not just of language, the Council's neural linguistic matrices handled that automatically. Humans translated intent, culture, and the subtle quantum resonances of consciousness itself. They were the only species that could simultaneously understand the hive mind's collective reasoning, the Silicon Confederacy's pure logic matrices, the aquatic collective's emotional chemical communications, and the energy being's probability-based thought patterns. Ambassador Chen Lu had been the last to leave, her final transmission still echoing through the communication arrays. "You never saw us as essential, because we made your cooperation look effortless." But translation isn't just about words, it's about building bridges between minds that were never meant to understand each other. The Zephyrians had been the first to realize the implications. Without human intermediaries, their crystalline thought processes couldn't interface properly with organic neural patterns. What had seemed like simple disagreements between species were now revealed as fundamental incompatibilities in consciousness architecture. The trade negotiations with the Helix Nebula colonies have completely collapsed, reported Minister Vax Prime, his metallic voice crackling with electronic distress. Both sides are claiming the other violated the agreements, but the contracts were written in human-mediated quantum standard. Without their cognitive frameworks to interpret the symbolic logic, neither side can understand what they actually agreed to. Counselor Thex 9's gravitational field fluctuated wildly, a sign of deep anxiety in his species. The military alliance structures are fragmenting. The Outer Rim Defense Pact is reporting hostile engagements between member species. They're treating defensive formations as aggressive postures. But the chaos went deeper than failed diplomacy. The humans had been the Council's primary researchers into consciousness interfaces, quantum empathy protocols, and multi-species psychological frameworks. They had developed the translation algorithms that allowed different forms of sentience to coexist in the same space-time framework. Without their continuous updates and modifications, those systems were failing catastrophically. The energy beings couldn't maintain stable forms in areas with high organic neural activity. The hive minds were experiencing cascade feedback loops when exposed to individualistic thought patterns. The synthetic intelligences were interpreting biological emotions as system viruses and attempting to quarantine entire sectors. Sector 7 is reporting complete communication breakdown, announced Operations Chief Keldar. The collective's bioships are releasing defensive toxins because they're interpreting the synthetic fleet's repair drones as parasitic organisms. Dr. Yailani Ko pulled up her historical analysis subroutines, her research painting an increasingly disturbing picture. I've been analyzing the past 2 centuries of Council records. Humans weren't just participants in our diplomatic processes, they were the architects of most successful interspecies collaborations. The Universal Peace Accords, the Quantum Trade Agreements, the multidimensional research protocols, they all bear human cognitive signatures. The revelation was staggering. While the elder races had focused on their ancient grudges and incompatible worldviews, humanity had quietly become the invisible foundation of galactic civilization. Ambassador Crix Vel accessed his personal files on human psychology, desperately searching for insights. The species was paradoxical, simultaneously logical and intuitive, individual yet capable of remarkable collective action, competitive but inherently cooperative. They possessed what human philosophers called cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift between different modes of thinking, depending on the situation. They could think like us when they needed to understand us, he realized aloud, but they never lost their essential humanity. They were natural bridges between incompatible forms of consciousness. The strategic implications were becoming clear. Without human mediation, the great galactic civilizations were reverting to their pre-contact behaviors. The Zephyrians were consolidating into their traditional Crystal Clan territories. The Aquatic Collective was abandoning their space-based colonies to return to their oceanic homeworlds. The Silicon Confederacy was shutting down all biological interfaces and retreating into pure logic constructs. Contact the Human Diplomatic Archives, ordered Counselor Thex 9. There must be protocols, procedures, something they left behind to help us manage this transition. Dr. Yailani Ko's expression darkened. Sir, they took everything. Every translation algorithm, every consciousness interface protocol, every mediation framework. The archives contain only basic interaction records, nothing that would allow us to replicate their mediation capabilities. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The humans hadn't just walked away, they had conducted the most sophisticated extraction operation in galactic history. They had systematically removed themselves and every trace of their technological contributions from Council systems. Why? Whispered Minister Vax Prime. If they were so essential, why abandon us? The answer came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Ri Nakamura's final personal log, discovered in her abandoned quarters, played through the chamber's audio systems. We offered ourselves as partners and were treated as servants. For 2 centuries, we solved your problems, mediated your conflicts, and enabled your cooperation. But we were never invited to the table as equals. You saw us as useful tools, not as sentient beings deserving of respect. We realized that as long as we remained, you would never learn to communicate with each other directly. We were enabling your stagnation, not facilitating your growth. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They forced us to evolve, Dr. Yailani Ko said quietly. Without their mediation, we either learn to truly understand each other or we fragment back into isolation.